Welcome to a new video about those two bad boys here, the Xiaomi 14 Pro against the Xiaomi 14. In terms of cameras, I did already a 4K 60 frames per second daylight kind of video comparison, and what I want to do right now is a photo comparison between those two, or basically a camera comparison, where I will skip maybe the daylight video part because we saw that already and there's nothing really that takes them apart. Nevertheless, let's get started. So I have both devices here, as you can see, and we want to check out the camera system. As you can see here, both feature the same kind of camera system. We just have a slightly different version number for the software, but both are on the latest version. As you can see here, 1020 on the Xiaomi 14 and 1021 on the Xiaomi 14 Pro. And we will check out the camera specs first, and this is basically the same kind of camera specs, just that the ultra wide angle doesn't have autofocus on the Xiaomi 14, where it has autofocus on the 14 Pro, and also the variable aperture on the 14 Pro that makes the device and its camera bump look very bumpy and big. My daughter is playing in the background there, also wants to join in. Front-facing camera is also the same, so yeah, I think we start off with some photo comparisons now. Let's take a look at the photos. On the left, the Xiaomi 14, on the right, the Xiaomi 14 Pro. Do we notice any difference here taken with the main camera sensor? Yeah, maybe the angle is slightly different, but you can clearly see that we have a brightened up picture on the Xiaomi 14, where we have a bit more contrasty and darker look on the 14 Pro for sure, and a bit more punchy colors. You can clearly see it here, where here everything is a little bit dark, where here we have like a bit of a haze going on and it's a bit brightened up. And what we can clearly see here when we take a look at the details is we have a bit more details on the Xiaomi 14 in comparison to the 14 Pro. Look at the controller there, look at the controller here. It is just not only the colors look a bit more pleasant on the 14, but it's also looking a bit more detailed. And it's interesting because the 14 Pro went to the f1.4 aperture. So it has this variable aperture where you can change from f1.4 to f4. And we have the fixed one on the Xiaomi 14 with f1.6. ISO is quite a bit lower on the Xiaomi 14 Pro. This is the big benefit that you get with the f1.4, where we have ISO 400 here on the Xiaomi 14. And also the shutter speed is a bit higher on the 14. So nevertheless, we have a bit more blur there. It appears to be a bit more blurry. I'm not sure why that is, but you will see that in other pictures taken with the main camera that the Xiaomi 14 seems to be better, especially also in HDR. Look at this here, the sky, and look at here. It was a grayish kind of day, and no, I didn't take them apart. Those photos like super long time apart, just like seconds, split seconds maybe, taking one phone, taking the shot, and then the other phone taking the shot. When we come to the macro capabilities of both phones, also very interesting, because here I think also the Xiaomi 14 has a slight advantage over the Xiaomi 14 Pro. When we take a look at the metadata, we can see both using 75mm. We have 9mm real photo lengths here, where we have 10.1 on the Xiaomi 14 Pro, so slight difference in terms of lens there for sure. ISO 1600 on both, 1/50th of a second the shutter speed. But when we zoom in, first of all, we can clearly see it's either sharpening up a lot on the 14 Pro, or it has some noise creeping in and the denoising algorithm is not active. But I think it is more like trying to sharpen things up on the 14 Pro, where it looks completely wrong because this should not be in focus at all, but it's sharpened up for some reason. Here it is correctly done on the 14, where it's like not sharp, and this should be sharp here actually, where here this is the focus point was also clearly here. So you can clearly see that the Xiaomi 14 in this case appears to be a bit better. Also, it's a bit brightened up on the Xiaomi 14 Pro for some reason. I'm not sure why that is, both using Leica Authentic in this case. Also, selfies here, very interesting. I think the Xiaomi 14 is doing a slight worse job than the 14 Pro. have this overexposure here on the side, which we don't have on the 14 Pro. I took another shot there as well to check this out. And yeah, I think it is a warmed up look on the 14 Pro, a little bit warmer than on the 14 for sure. Detail level, when you take a look at the eyes and so on, it's practically the same. It's just not much of a difference. Let's take a look at portrait shots. And quite interesting as well here is that we have a difference again. This is a default portrait mode on both. Both utilize, I think it's like 60 something millimeters. Just can take a look at here. Yeah, 60 millimeters on the Xiaomi 14, and the software is like cropping in to the main camera sensor on the 14 Pro to 67 millimeter, which is probably 9 millimeter here and 10.1 millimeter here. I think it's a crop in of the, is it a crop in of the, not even that. I think it is really utilizing the telezoom camera. It's just that the telezoom camera, yeah, it's supposed to be 3.2 times zoom. Actually, it is not, because both are cropping into 3.2 times zoom, and it's just like, I think 2.8 or 2.9-ish kind of real zoom. And if you go into the default portrait mode, both utilize this sensor already. This is why you also have the f-stop number f2 here. But it is portrait mode, so it could be also like a fake f-stop number that they're showing up here. In any way, we have 1/33th of a second shutter speed and 2500 ISO on the Xiaomi 14 Pro and 3200 ISO on the Xiaomi 14. And when we go a little bit closer, what you can clearly see is a bit more warmish kind of color on the Xiaomi 14 Pro, maybe a tad too warm, I would say, where the Xiaomi 14 keeps the colors a little bit more real. But when I zoom in, it's quite interesting because we get a sharper picture definitely on the Xiaomi 14 Pro. And one thing I could imagine why it's sharper is because it's a bit more closed down. As you can see, I was standing at the same position. It's just like 67 millimeters instead of 60 millimeters on the Xiaomi 14. But when we take a look at the sharpness and detail level, what we can clearly see is like, it doesn't look so artificially sharpened up on the Xiaomi 14, where the Xiaomi 14 Pro has a little bit of more sharpening applied there. Overall, yes, the Xiaomi 14 Pro is a little bit sharper, but I prefer the colors of the Xiaomi 14 in comparison to the 14 Pro. When we go to the real deal, 75 millimeters on both, so you choose the 75 millimeter version of the portrait mode, both 1/25th of a second, ISO 3200, f1.2, basically the same kind of settings there, not much of a difference. And also now the framing looks exactly the same, but again we have this warmed up colors on the Xiaomi 14 Pro, where we have more realistic kind of face colors on the Xiaomi 14, which is on the 14 already a little bit warmer, but the 14 Pro is getting a step over this, getting it a bit more warm. And again, the difference in terms of sharpness, where we have a little bit more, I think, sharpening applied to the 14 Pro, which makes it appear a little bit more sharper, especially my nose region and so on. And also my eyebrows, you can clearly see it. Where, yeah, the Xiaomi 14 looks a bit more realistic, and the 14 Pro, you see a little bit of those sharpened up things. So which one would you choose in this case? Yes, the 14 Pro is a bit sharper, but I like the colors of the 14 a little bit better. Let's take a look at another main camera shot, this time around with 46 millimeter on both. So both I'm cropping in 2 times, but you can clearly see again the real difference here is like a 6.6 millimeter versus 6.7 millimeter. I think it has something to do with the main camera sensor, main camera lens on the Xiaomi 14 Pro having variable aperture. So the real photo length is a bit different there. f1.4 versus f1.6, ISO 320 versus 250, 1/100th of a second exposure time. So we have a little bit more darker colors on the Xiaomi 14. Do we? Yes, it appears to be a bit darker. Let's zoom in, take a look at the detail level there. And let's take a look at the detail level here in the Xiaomi 14. And the focus point was clearly here on this face. Basically, this here is the focus point. And you can clearly see that for some reason, the Xiaomi 14 has it sharp, nice and sharp, where the 14 Pro at f1.4 has issues. It is not really sharp. This here is more sharp, but also sharp here. So yeah, back focusing issues maybe, but all over the place. It's hard, maybe, yeah, it's back focusing a little bit there. But here we have a blurry area already starting. So either focusing issue, or we really have a softer picture overall with f1.4 on the Xiaomi 14 Pro. f1.4 versus f1.6, do we see any difference otherwise in terms of bokeh, for example? Nope. I'll be completely honest, f1.6 and f1.4 are so close together, I don't see the difference between them in terms of bokeh. Yeah, you be the judge. Tell me in the comments if you see the difference there in terms of bokeh, but I don't see the benefit of f1.4 currently on the Xiaomi 14 Pro for the main camera sensor throughout all the photos, and we are not even talking about the night photos. We'll talk about them later. Then 3.2 times zoom actually on both. Again, you can clearly see there both ISO 800, both 100ths of a second. So not much of a difference there, is there? Let's take a look at here and let's take a look at there. Do you notice the difference? Interesting, before I was talking about the Xiaomi 14 Pro seems to sharpen things up. And again, I think I see a little bit more noise. Maybe I'm wrong, but look at the eye here and look at here. I think I see a little more noise. Might be the sharpening algorithms on one side. On the other side, I see, when we take a look at clarity and sharpness here, look at the details there. It is not bad on the 14 Pro, but if you have to pixel beep to compare. It appears to be a bit sharper on the 14. Again, this is why I think the telezoom camera on the 14, especially when it comes to those close-up shots, is a bit better on the 14 instead of the 14 Pro. Why is that the case? We can clearly see again, deducted from the real photo length, 9mm versus 10.1mm. So I can, I think, get a bit closer to objects and still have them sharp with the 14. Okay, let's go to ultra wide angle. Ultra wide angle is quite interesting because I saw a difference. Yeah, I saw basically a difference before, and you can clearly see it here as well. First of all, we have a little bit more warm kind of cast here on the side. Here's a bit colder. Can you see that? It's a bit warmer here. Here's a bit colder on the ultra wide angle. Otherwise, the differences are really negligible. Are not much of a difference there at all between the ultra wide angles. I really was pixel peeping and so on. I saw in video mode that we had like one side a little bit softer on the 14 Pro, but in this case for the photos I really don't see much of a difference there. Here maybe slightly less warm, here a bit more warm, but it's basically negligible what you see in terms of difference there. Not much of a difference. Even here the exposure in the background, no issues at all. Noise level, detail level, it's basically identical. Not much of a difference at all. I think I have to raise the points for the Xiaomi 14 Pro in terms of ultra wide angle because there's not much difference there between them both. So conclusion is, I think the Xiaomi 14 has a slightly better 3.2 times zoom camera. And in terms of sharpness, it has a clearly visible better main camera sensor with more details that you can see here. Better exposure, I think, as well, and better HDR handling, at least for now. And the Xiaomi 14 Pro has some software issues with the telezoom camera still, with a little bit too much noise for closed-up shots and such things. And also I think the f1.4 variable aperture Xiaomi 14 Pro is maybe stretching it a little bit there. What do you think? A nighttime video Xiaomi 14. What do you think about the quality here with the night video mode on the Xiaomi, which is using 4K 24 frames per second. The light now above me and now behind me, walking towards a darker area here. And yeah, what does it look like? What do you think about the quality here? And also the audio quality, because I'm using the internal mics of the Xiaomi 14. Xiaomi 14 Pro nighttime video. It has a dedicated night mode, 4K 24 frames per second. So I'm using right now, walking towards the light. Has a variable aperture, probably also wide open at f1.4. How does this look like and compare with the other phone? What do you think about now standing directly under the light and now walking with the light in the background? How well is the exposure on my face? How well is stabilization? And how well is it controlling noise? And by the way, how well are the integrated microphones here on the Xiaomi 14 Pro? Let's take a look at nighttime shots. Quite interesting, Xiaomi 14 versus 14 Pro, where I would say, yeah, usually the Xiaomi 14 Pro with variable aperture and wider aperture that you can get on the 14 Pro should win, shouldn't it? But let's take a look. Do we see the same thing that we saw on the daylight also at nighttime? And sadly, that is the case. I think still the Xiaomi 14 has the better main camera setup that produces better photos in also challenging conditions like this. For once, one thing that I can tell you immediately is like the coating on both is bad. Same position, but both struggle with the coating a little bit. It's not bad, it's not super bad, but you can clearly see some halo effects and some issues there. What you can also clearly see is that the Xiaomi 14 is a bit sharper than the 14 Pro in this regard, reading the text. And it's not artificial sharpening, it's just like simply the f1.6 is helping here. Both, even the Xiaomi 14 has ISO 2000, where 1600 on the 14 Pro, because f1.4, 1/10 of a second exposure time on both shutter speed. I think the night mode kicked in eventually. But yeah, it appears to be sharper. Look at the air conditioning system. I can see a bit more details there. Look at the cars. Look at the license plate of the cars. I see a bit more details. Look at here. Look at this. I see a bit more details on the Xiaomi 14 in comparison to the 14 Pro. It's just simply the case that the 14 seems to be a bit clearer than the 14 Pros in this case. Next shot here. Not so much of a difference in this case, but still visible. Look at the car, for example, here, the Mercedes. Sharper again on the Xiaomi 14, where the 14 Pro is a bit softer. Can I zoom in? Yeah, I can zoom in to show it to you. The details here, the grille and the license plate. It's clearly sharper, more detailed on the 14. Yeah, I have to pixel peep so much because this is how you see the difference. Ultra wide angle, not so much of a difference. I'm surprised because, like I said before, I saw the difference. Here, I have to say, I don't see much of a difference between them both. Maybe slightly exposure brightened up on the 14 Pro. A bit more noise creeping in, maybe slightly warmer colors here on the 14, but it is nitpicking. I would just say also detail level here, it's on par. It's on par. There's not much of a difference there between them two. If you see something here, just tell me, but I think they are basically on par. Not much of a difference there. Maybe a bit warmer colors on the 14 Pro and less warmer colors on the 14. I think I have to change the ranking there, but they're both basically the same. Interestingly enough, the zoom lens here at night performs a bit better, I think, on the 14 Pro. When we take a look at the zoom here, this is, by the way, 75 millimeters, or 3.2 times zoom, and 1/70th of a second, ISO 4000, so basically same conditions. Do we see noticeable differences here? Not really. But when I zoom in here on the background, we can clearly see here it is not readable what was written here. Could be because there's a car like with the lights, and this might have distracted the autofocus or whatever. Because the rest here, for example, this the front and here the lights are okay. So this might have distracted something there in terms of the reconstruction of the text there. Otherwise, the detail levels here in the background are the same, not much of a difference. I don't see a big difference between them two. Quite interesting. But when I take a look at the selfies, we can clearly see again a little bit of a casting going on the Xiaomi 14 Pro that makes everything like brightened up a little bit here. And my jacket, which is actually black, having a haze effect here. This is the only difference that I noticed between the two, because detail level is basically the same. So I really cannot see much of a difference between them two, to be completely honest there, when it comes to this kind of selfie there. Both doing a fine job here. Zoom lens, second time, and here I think we see the difference a little bit more. As soon as there's a bit more light going on, the Xiaomi 14 is, I think, surpassing slightly the Xiaomi 14 Pro. Let's take a look. 3.2 times zoom. HDR handled a little bit better. I think it's a bit too wide here. Let's take a look at the rest here of the shot. Here the green, I think, a bit more punchy, but Magrina here a bit too bright maybe. Look at the detail levels there. Look at the detail levels here. Basically the same, where I think we see a bit more noise on the 14 Pro. in comparison to the 14, which is quite interesting. The snag and sharp also slightly overexposed here on the 14 Pro again. What do we have in terms of ISO? ISO 4000, ISO 4000. Faster shutter speed we have on the 14, interestingly enough. So this is the only difference that we have here. And yeah, the rest looks basically the same, but again appears to be a bit noisier on the 14 Pro for some reason, and the 14 a bit cleaner there. It is really nitpicking, but I would give it slightly to the 14 there in this case. Why, you will see right now, because this is 10 times zoom. When I 10 times zoom it, you will see even more stuff, it's cropping in and so on. But at 10 times zoom, what we can clearly see here, the Xiaomi 14 is beating the 14 Pro. Noise levels, look at the text, sharpness, readable, very nice. Maybe slightly overexposed here in terms of the numbers that are showing up. I think maybe this is a bit better here on the 14 Pro, but look at the text. Look, this is like, especially the text down below here. This is a huge difference, I would say, a difference that I would also here, again, we had it already at 3.2 times zoom, but here it's like, I think a bit more like the overexposure here on the 14 Pro, definitely seen, not so much on the 14. So I think it's a win for the 14 here in terms of 10 times zoom. Ultra wide angle again, kind of slightly hard to take this shot because cars are passing by. So the foreground, just ignore the foreground. Let's look at the background there. We see a bit more noise, a bit more raised, kind of 14 Pro. Ultra wide angle, identical. I don't see much of a difference. I really have to nitpick then. And yeah, because the conditions are slightly different, then maybe it chooses also different shutter speed and ISO. No, shutter speed, ISO, exactly the same, everything here. Sharper definitely on the 14 here in this case, but here maybe the autofocus might have been distracted by one of the lights, could be. So just benefit of the doubt, let's leave it as being equal there at this point. And yeah, conclusion is definitely the Xiaomi 14 when it comes to the main camera, better than the 14 Pro again. And it's basically the same as the daylight. And I think also the telezoom, especially with the second telezoom samples, you saw it, performing better on the Xiaomi 14 than on the Xiaomi 14 Pro. Yeah, it is not a huge difference, but we are talking about a ranking system and points that I have to give for such super flagship devices, and then those little bits and pieces and all the photos that I took, also like photos of people that don't want to be shown on the internet, that also clearly show that Xiaomi 14, especially for those portrait kind of shots that you do of people with the 3.2 times zoom, performs a bit better than the 14 Pro. Let's come to the conclusion and the ranking. TLDR, here you can see it, Xiaomi 14 Pro 4.31999 points and the Xiaomi 14 4.395 points. I don't think the Xiaomi 14 has improved or got worse. I think the Xiaomi 14 Pro has changed slightly there. What we can clearly see is still the main camera quality of the Xiaomi 14 on all other locations and all other things that I tested out mostly is better than the Xiaomi 14 Pro. The Xiaomi 14 Pro tends to go f2 if it's like a little bit too bright outside. It's not going f1.6. And sometimes it's going to f1.4, but at f1.4, when it's going to f1.4, the outcome is slightly worse than on the Xiaomi 14. The HDR is not good enough, I would say. Colors are sometimes a little bit off. There's a bit of noise creeping in. It's a bit less sharp than the Xiaomi 14, and all of those criteria just lead to, yeah, Xiaomi 14 Pro only 4.5 points. And I think I tested out the Xiaomi 14 Pro against the Mate 60 Pro and figured also out that the Mate 60 Pro has a slightly better camera there. Main camera quality is better there. So this is why, yeah, 4.5 points there only on the Xiaomi 14 Pro. And this is the one that is the biggest disappointment on the 14 Pro, because I thought with the variable aperture we have a little bit more flexibility and have at least, if not even better, main camera photo quality on the 14 Pro, but this is sadly not the case. Ultra wide angle is basically the same. I raised the points there for the Xiaomi 14 Pro. It was 4.0 before because I saw some differences between the 14, but now after all the updates, the 14 Pro also got I don't see that so much, so maybe they compensated for this. Basically on par in terms of the ultra wide angle. Where I still see a difference is zoom camera photo quality, noise levels, close focusing distance, slightly a bit sharper here and there. At night you can also see, especially when it comes to the 10 times zoom, which is quite interesting there, the Xiaomi 14 was better than the 14 Pro, so slightly ahead the Xiaomi 14 there against the 14 Pro. Video recording quality basically the same. I told you already. I showed you also the photo quality between those two. They're identical. There's not much of a difference between them two. The same goes for the autofocus performance. Not much of a difference. Also quick and snappy, the autofocus front-facing camera. Also, I put them both in the same league. I think before I had the Xiaomi 14 slightly worse, but the Xiaomi 14 also got a little bit more updates, and I think they are now basically on par. There's a bit of a difference sometimes with the colors here and there, shifting around, especially at nighttime, you can clearly see it, but I think they're basically on par, not much of a difference there. Camera UI and extra features are identical, so not much to talk about. So this is the end result, and let's take a look at the ranking list then for them. And as you can clearly see here, it's impressive still. The Xiaomi 14 is on par with the Xiaomi 13 Ultra with 4.395 points, where the Xiaomi 14 Pro is a little bit slightly down here, as you can clearly see it, with 4.31999 points. And the biggest issue for this is not really the ultra wide camera differences or the slight changes, differences between the zoom camera photo quality, because the rest is basically the same. The major thing is really the Xiaomi 14 Pro struggles with its main camera sensor and the variable aperture, and I hope Xiaomi can update this, because this is a little bit of a bummer here, because all the other ones are in the same kind of ballpark. You can see the Google Pixel 8 Pro even slightly worse main camera here, Vivo X90 Pro better, Samsung even worse main camera quality in comparison to all of them, but has in comparison to all of them the best zoom camera, and this is like catapulting it up here. So take this chart here and look at what you need. I'm like giving you my points here, like 20 20 20 something points. It's written here like 20 15 15 20 10 10 5 5% as my weight of how I calculate those things. But if you are like saying, I don't need the ultra wide angle or zoom photos, I don't take so much, I want the best main camera sensor, then look at the Xiaomi 14, Xiaomi 13 Ultra, Oppo Find X6 Pro, Honor Magic 5 Pro, Vivo X90 Pro Plus, such things. So yeah, just take a look at the chart here, and this is what you will get. You can see both are splendid devices, but in the end of the day, the best or the better camera setup you get on the Xiaomi 14, especially if you just point and shoot and want to take the shot. More flexibility, this is something that is not really put into this chart here, you get with the 14 Pro, because you can go into Pro mode, you can have a bit more creativity, flexibility with the variable aperture on the main camera sensor for sure, but this is not taken into account here in this table. Nevertheless, all of them, all of those devices that I tested here take wonderful shots and are worthy to be on this list here. And yeah, that's it for this video. What is your opinion? Write it down in the comment section. Xiaomi 14 beats the Xiaomi 14 Pro in terms of photo camera. And yeah, are you surprised? Write it down in the comments. That's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Until the next time. Bye.